Hello and welcome to this HTML and CSS tutorial, this time looking at divs and looking at structuring content on an HTML web page using divs. Now before we get started and look at how we can code divs, we first need to understand what they are. So I'm going to use the example of an existing web page, the World Vision New Zealand web page, just to try to start to understand what a div is. So we can think of a div as like a box on a web page, a box that content can go inside of. And all web pages are made up essentially of series of boxes, sometimes boxes inside of boxes. So let's have a quick look at this web page and see if we can spot the boxes. We've got one here that surrounds the content on the top of the page with all the menu items and the logo in it. We've got one here that is the big photo that we see immediately in front of us. On top of or inside of that photo, it looks like we've got a box that fits this text content in it just around here. That sits on the right hand side of the photo. If I scroll down a little bit, we might have another box here, and inside that one we might have another box that's grey here. Scrolling down, obviously another box that is this photograph here, and a box inside of it, which is this white text here. And similarly for this photograph, a box or a div for the photo and a box or a div for the text. Here we've got two divs that sit next to each other. This one that goes around the photograph, and then all the way down to about here. And then another one for this photograph, so around the outside and all the way up. So you can see essentially web pages are laid out as a series of boxes stacked on top of each other or beside each other. Oh, here's an interesting view as well. 3 divs right beside each other, 3 boxes. So the word div, I guess, is short for a division, because we're dividing our page up into different spaces. So let's look at our code that we've got currently for a web page. So I've got my doc type, my HTML tag, my head tag with a link to a style sheet and with a title. After my head closes here, I've got my body tag that opens. And remember, everything that you see on a page should be inside the body. So we've got there we go, there's the close of our body. So it looks like 1, 2, 3 paragraphs of text and a heading on our page. I just want to preview that so you can see what it looks like currently. Now this doesn't have any CSS applied to it, so it's pretty basic. So a heading, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs of text. Pretty boring. The first thing I'm going to do is just add some CSS to give the page a background color. This will just help us kind of see what's going on. So if I go back to Notepad++ and into my style sheet that I've already saved, I'm going to give the body a background color. And I'm going to make that background color light gray. Just one word for light gray. Let's save that, and I'll go and refresh my page. And you can see the color changes there. So I've got a light gray background now. I want to also change the font of this. I'm going to make this a sans serif font. So that's my H1. So I'll create a new definition for H1s, for headings. And I'm going to say font-family sans-serif. And while I'm at it, I might make the text color white as well. Oh no, I'll leave it as black. So let's have a quick look. If I refresh my page, you'll see the typeface or the font has now changed for this H1 heading. Okay, so let's create a div now. So I'll go back to my HTML, and the first div that I want to create, actually I'll show you on the World Vision page, the first div that I want to create is kind of like, it's going to be at the top of the page, and it's going to be as wide as the whole page is, and it's going to be like where we contain our heading. So it's going to be like the header of the page. So in our code, around the outside of my h1 tags, I'm going to create some new div tags. So it starts before the h1 and closes after the h1. And just to show that the h1 is inside of those div tags, I'm going to press tab before the h1 to push it inside of these two div tags. Now, we could have like 25 different divs on our page. And if we wanted them all to look different, we'd have a problem, because in our style sheet, if we just did some styling for divs, the style that we wrote inside there, well, that would apply to every single div on the page. So we'd be in a little bit of trouble. So what we need to do instead is we need to give our div a particular ID. An ID is a way of saying, let's just focus on this one particular div. So I'm going to, inside my brackets here, inside my angle brackets, after the word div, I'm going to leave a space, and then I'm going to say ID equals, and then inside of some quotes, I'm going to type what my div will be called. So I'm going to give this div an ID of header. So now I've got a div, and its ID is header, because this is my header div on my page. So now in CSS, instead of just saying div, I can say hash, the hash symbol, which is like the little noughts and crosses symbol. That's used in CSS to say, look for an ID. So it's like shorthand for writing ID. Hash header, with no space between it. And this is going to target specifically the thing on my page that's got an ID of header. And I'm going to say background color, let's say red, just so it's quite visible. So I'll save the style sheet now. And I'm going to go and refresh my page, and we'll see what that looks like. So I've put a div around this text here that's got a background color of red. So now you can see there's a box that sits around my header that's got a background color of red. Now that's looking nice. It's looking quite nice, but I reckon it might be a little bit small. So I'm going to add some more CSS to that particular div. I'm going to say height, to give it a particular height, colon 150 pixels, semicolon. Oh. And I'm going to see how that looks now. Alright, so now my header is looking quite nice, although this text is up on the top left and that doesn't look so good. So what I might do instead is I might reduce the height to just 100 pixels and give my header some padding. Now what padding is, essentially padding pushes things that are inside an object, it pushes them away from the edge. So if I gave this this div here some padding of say 50 pixels, it might push whatever's inside down 50 pixels from the top, up 50 pixels from the bottom, and in 50 pixels from each of the sides. So let's try that. Padding 50 pixels. I'll save that, and let's see what that looks like now. Alright, so now our heading's been pushed away from the top and away from the sides. It's still a little bit tall, I think, so I'm going to reduce the height of that to maybe say 80 pixels. Maybe just 50. And refresh. That's starting to look a lot better. Now, if I actually look at the height of this object, technically it's not 50 pixels high. I happen to know that that's about 180, 190 pixels high. And what's actually happening is it's giving the div a height of 50 pixels, but it's also adding the 50 pixels of padding for each side that we're putting on. So it's 50 pixels from the top, 50 pixels from the bottom, plus the 50 pixels height that we're giving it. So that's kind of like why it looks quite large for 50 pixels. There's one more thing that I want to do, and that's I want to make this text here appear in the middle of the page. So I'm going to say inside my header div, in my CSS, I'm going to say text dash align center, and save that. And I will refresh now, and you'll see now my text is in the middle of the page. So this is looking much nicer. I'm going to leave it here, and we'll carry on with this tutorial in the next video, part 2 of the divs tutorial.